How to choose your first private jet? That's the question we're going to answer today on this episode of BizJet TV. Welcome to the channel. Lots of information here about private aviation, which is why you're here. My name is Fabrizio. I'm an airline transport pilot and your aviation advisor, and also the author of the book, The Quantum Economy. This book is about how to take you to the quantum, into the quantum economy, move at that quantum speed, and the private jet is key, and that's what we talk about in the book. Talk about entrepreneurs, about private jets, and the advantages of private jet travel. So let's focus on the first thing. Let's talk about the private jet market. Now, we all went through this COVID experience a few years ago where there were lockdowns, travel was very limited, and, you know, as this happened, more and more people realized that actually you can get a lot of business done by sitting at home on your computer and doing a Zoom call. And so as entrepreneurs realized this, they thought to themselves, well, do I really have to live in central New York or Los Angeles or, you know, in this large metropolitan area? You know, I've been sitting here in my mountain home, enjoying the mountains and the fresh air, the good food, and, you know, relaxing and meditating and that, as well as getting work done. And I've actually got more work done. I think I'm going to use this as my primary residence. But a lot of these locations, like Jackson Hole or Sun Valley, for example, or, you know, Fort Lauderdale. Well, Fort Lauderdale's got quite good airline service because it's got Miami nearby. But, you know, you talk of Sun Valley or Jackson Hole, whatever, the airline services in and out of some of these secondary or regional airports after COVID got worse because a lot of the airlines scrapped loads of those routes. So what's happened is a lot of people decided to go and buy their own aeroplane or to start chartering a private jet in order to get in and out of these places. So they said, well, you know, figured, you know, I'm not going to be living in New York all the time, but I'd like to go to New York twice a month. And I want to be able to go in and out quick. And actually, if I go private, I can land at this airport instead of the main airport, and I can get in and out on my schedule. There's lots of advantages. So people started to look into this medium of travel. And some people decided that they were going to learn to fly. And I told this story before. A client of mine, he was watching BizJet TV, incidentally, during COVID. And he'd always had a desire to learn to fly. So he reached out to me and said, look, I want to buy this Cirrus S22. I think I found some options there. We found one in Italy. So we acquired the aircraft for him. I organised a ferry flight. So we ferried the airplane over from Bologna, Italy, all the way to Houston in Texas. This gentleman started flying, got his private pilot's license, flew like crazy for about 1,000 hours, visiting different locations of his businesses that he has. He's in the franchising business. And he said, you know, using this little Cirrus airplane, which is it's a single-engine propeller airplane with very modern avionics and that, he used this airplane, and in a year, he tripled his business as a result of using the plane. And then he moved on to buying another airplane, keeping the first one and adding to the fleet, a turboprop, which is 300-knot airplane. And I think he's going to probably 6 to 7 times his business in the next 12 months as a result of using that airplane. So, how many airplanes are there in the world? Private jets. There's 24,000 private jets. Add turboprops and the private jets together, about 45,000 airplanes out there on a population of 8 billion people. Next is how many people can actually afford private jet travel. And when I say afford private jet travel, I mean, you know, from charter all the way up to ownership. We're talking about 3 to 3.5 million people in the world. So that's not many people in the overall world population that can do this. But it's interesting to see that out of the 3.5 million people, only 45,000 own their own aircraft. And when I say own their own aircraft, out of those 45,000, there's quite a few of them which are in a fractional ownership scheme. So what does that mean? That means that you've got maybe 8 owners for one airplane. So that's where we're at. So there aren't that many people joining this quantum economy and flying private. But in my book, The Quantum Economy, I talk about the story of Sam Walton and amongst other stories of other entrepreneurs. Sam Walton built Walmart, and a lot of people don't know that airplanes and private aircraft has been key to building and also expanding today in 2024 the Walmart empire around the world. They have a fleet of 30 aircraft today, mostly Learjets, and they fly their people around America and around the world to meetings, often having 2 or 3 different meetings in different cities in one day. And they can only do this if with private aircraft. It's not possible to do with the airlines. And the situation has got worse after COVID because a lot of the regional airlines have scrapped certain routes. A lot of regional airlines went bust and never restarted again. So this is kind of the scenario that's out there. So why should you buy a private jet? So now you see that there are a number of individuals that have done this and that are doing this. And you're asking yourself the question, well, should I buy a private jet? How do I go and buy a private jet? But before you jump into how, and before I explain to you the how, let's just ponder here a little bit on the why. Now, when people approach this whole private jet thing, they always think, how much is it going to cost me and how much is it going to cost me to operate? But what you need to ask yourself first of all is, why do you want a private jet? Now, a lot of people, the first instinct that a lot of people, maybe even you are watching this episode of BizJet TV, is thinking, well, actually it's a luxury thing. You know, you can fly in your own aeroplane, have your caviar and champagne and this, that, the other, which is fine, but it is a business tool. Now, first of all, you're going to have access to a lot more airports. And so if you're going into a large metropolitan area for a meeting, chances are that that city probably has 4 or 5 or maybe even more airports. So if you're going into the western part of that city, why not fly into an airport that's on that western side? Oh, there's a runway there. Okay, I can actually land on that runway with my aeroplane. You're going to save a lot of time. The last thing you want to do is land, get off the aeroplane, and then get stuck in traffic for an hour and a half. So it gives you the ability to land on a lot more airports. In America, there's about 5,000 airports, and only 500 of them are serviced by the airlines. If you add the unpaved runways, we're talking about 10,000 landing strips all across North America. There's a lot of places you can land. So it gives you a lot more options to save time. Because as I always say to people, when you're buying a private jet, you're not buying a jet, you're buying time. And I want you to remember this, the buying time bit. Because we talk a lot about the airplane, but there's another factor which is more important than the airplane. And I'll mention that a bit later on in this presentation. So let's continue. Now, so once you've focused on, you know, the fact that you can fly into many more different locations, the next thing you need to ask yourself is, where could I go and do business? And what impact would it have if I were to travel by private jet? But also the other thing is, what if I sent my jet out to pick somebody up to come and see me to do a deal? So start thinking about, where could I go? How many deals could I do? Who could I send the jet to pick up to come to me? So this is a tool, okay? And this tool is going to really get you and your business into that quantum economy. You're going to be a lot faster than anybody else. And this is really, really key. So this is the thing you need to think about. So when you're thinking about why you're going to buy the private jet, yes, the comfort and the safety and all that, but the fact, that flexibility, that time saving that you're going to have, and those different places you can go to. So think of the deals that you will be able to do, the more deals that you'll be able to do, the more lucrative deals you'll be able to do as a result of having a private jet. Focus on those things more than the cost of the jet. It's a bit like innovation, and I've said this many times and I explain it in my book, The Quantum Economy. I explain that innovation is something that you can't measure before you do it. You can only measure after you've done it. And the private jet's the same thing. You can't really say, well, I'm going to fly 100 hours or 200 hours in my first year and it's going to cost me $3.5 million. Okay, there's no way of you saying to yourself, well, out of those trips, how many deals am I going to do? But when you look back after a year, year and a half, and you look back at all the trips, I did 30 trips in my jet in year 1. Okay, I closed 5 deals. Okay, how much did you make on those 5 deals? $100 million. How much did the jet cost you? $5 million. Operating costs, another 2. Okay, so it's $7 million all in is what the jet cost you, and you made $100 million. That's a $93 million that you made that you would have not made if you didn't have the jet. So that's the kind of mindset you've got. So that's the first thing you need to think about. Now, once you've thought about that, we go on to the next thing, is where you're going to go, okay, with this aeroplane, and we have to measure the distance. So you're going from this location to that location, and we have to see the different locations you're going to be going to. So that will give us an idea of basically the distances. And that will tell me what range you're going to need airplane-wise. Okay? Next thing is, how many people are going to be traveling with you? Because if you say, I'm going to be traveling 8 people all the time on my jet, and you're flying 4-hour legs every time, you want to have more of a spacious cabin. Now, bear in mind that most private jets fly around with 2 to 3 passengers. Okay, and I'm talking the small ones and the larger ones. Okay, now someone's going to say, oh, global warming, why should somebody be flying on a big jet if it's just him and his wife or him and his business associate? Again, Elon Musk is somebody that flies private, okay? And if he didn't fly private, he wouldn't be able to create all the jobs that he creates. So let's stay focused on this here. Let's not go down the environmental route here. Let's think of what impact you can have on the world if you fly private. So, first thing is how often will you fly, where you're going to, the distances. Now, this gives us an idea now of range and cabin size. Also, we have to look at performance of the aircraft. So if you're going into mountainous regions in the summer, you're going to need more runway. So is your airplane able to land and take off at that runway in the summer when it's 40 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit? These are questions that we need to ask. Then we go into the purchase price. So are you looking at buying a new airplane or a pre-owned airplane? Now, a lot of people, they reach out to me, and I had a conversation with a gentleman just recently, and he said, oh, how about buying a brand new Citation jet or a Phenom 300? So I spoke to Embraer, I spoke to Cessna for this gentleman. I got back to him and said, look, it's going to be about $12 to $12.5 million, and you've got a 2 to 3 year wait. And he said, oh, wow. But if you buy a pre-owned airplane, I mean, the Cessnas are about 3 million. 2.5 to 3 million. The Phenom's a bit more expensive, about 7 million, 8 million pre-owned market. So that's where you sit. But for $3.5 million, you can get yourself a Citation jet instead of paying. So well, then why do people buy new? People buy new because they take advantage of the taxes and the bonus depreciation. That's why people buy new aircraft. Otherwise, you might as well buy a 5, 6, even 10-year-old airplane. It's going to do exactly the same job. It's going to cost you pretty much the same amount of money. I mean, yes, an older airplane out of warranty will probably have a few more maintenance events, but this is where the people that look after the airplane are going to be key, because if it's flown well and maintained well, it will break down less. And then the next thing you need to look at is, okay, well, if I'm going to buy this type of aircraft built by this OEM, which is aircraft manufacturer, in the region where I'm going to operate and base the aircraft, how quick is it for them to get spare parts and get the airplane fixed? So this is an important question that needs to be asked as you're gathering your information on this. Next thing you need to look at, of course, are your operating costs. So you buy the airplane for $3.5 million. How much is it going to cost you to run? $1.5 million a year. Okay, have we got that in our budget? Yes, we do. Okay. And of course, the $1.5 million, you're not paying it all in one go. You're paying it as you go. So that's the other thing is financing options. Now, a lot of airplanes that are maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old can be financed about 80%. If we start to get into the older jets, like 15 to 20 years old, then we're talking about 50%. But what happens, it does take about a couple of months to get financing approved. So what I suggest to people is let's go out and buy the aircraft cash while you're applying to get the financing, and then the finance will kick in maybe a month after you've acquired the aircraft, and you just take that money back and off you go. So that's one way of doing it. Now, private jets, there's different types. There's a small little Cessnas and Phenom 100s or Honda jets, all the way up to the Global 6000s or Global 7500s or Gulfstream G700s and 800s. Or if you want to go to the Boeing business jet or the Airbus corporate jet, you can go down that route as well. Incidentally, those large airliners turned into private jets are actually cheaper to run than the private jets because there are more spare parts available, more pilots available, training is cheaper, but you may not necessarily want to be flying around in a Boeing 737. Also, the private jets, compared to the airliner turned into private jet, fly higher. They fly at 45,000 feet, which is usually above all traffic and all weather, and they go a bit faster. So those are the advantages of buying like a G550. I mean, you'd only go down the airliner route, turn into a private jet, if you are carrying 10, 12 people per flight. Then it makes sense to have such a large airplane. Or maybe you just want a large airplane, which is fine. I sold a Boeing 777 to a gentleman a few years ago from an airline, and then we turned it into a private jet. And this gentleman owned 3 Gulfstreams, a bunch of helicopters, a Challenger 300, and Boeing 767 already, and a couple of BBJs, and he added a 777 to the fleet. He just wanted to add the 777 to his fleet. And this guy's not a royal family, he's a private individual. He just wanted to add the big airplane to his fleet, and he had the money to do it, so why not? So that's that. Now, a lot of people talk about fuel and fuel efficiency. Of course, the newer airplanes, because of the aerodynamic improvements and the engines, they do tend to burn a little bit less fuel. But as I always say, you're looking at that, you may be talking about buying new for 20 million, the newer version of a jet for 20 million, when you could buy a 15-year-old version of it for 5 million. So that $15 million difference, you can buy a lot of fuel. So that's the other thing to consider. You don't have to have the 20 million, and you don't have to buy the brand new airplane or the airplane that's a year or two old. You may want to look into an older one. And we're just doing a deal right now on a 25 plus year old Gulfstream G4SP for someone that's buying their first aircraft. And again, this is the third airplane we've looked at for this particular client, and we found a good airplane. We're going to do a couple of upgrades to it, one of them being Starlink and the internet. That's another thing which everybody's starting to do now, because everyone's used to connecting and having instantaneous communication with everybody at all times. When they get on their airplane, especially if it's a long flight, they want to be able to connect with the rest of the world. So Elon Musk has been putting lots of satellites in orbit, and people have been using Starlink. The beauty of using Starlink on your airplane is that the system is communicating from the airplane up to the satellite. There's very little interference, and the speeds are really, really good. I was talking to some people the other week, and they were telling me that they had 8 of them on an airplane, and they were all streaming from their iPads at 45,000 feet, and the connection was fantastic, a lot better than on the ground in the office or in their homes. So having Wi-Fi is important. If you're buying an older airplane, you need to see what type of Wi-Fi you can install on that. There are some Wi-Fis that work over ground, and there are other systems that work with a satellite system. A Starlink system works all over the world, so that's a good one, and it's also economical. It's just $10,000 a month for your service. Be very careful when you're signing up to one of these internet systems for your airplane, because there are some that are very expensive. On a transatlantic flight between London and New York, I heard a horror story the other week of 4 people traveling on a private jet across the Atlantic, and they got a $23,000 internet bill to pay. So yeah, you want to kind of avoid that. So paying to install something like Starlink, which can cost you between $300,000 to $350,000 on your airplane, is something. I mean, you may buy one that already has it, or if not, you can install it, and you need to check to see if that particular system can be installed in your airplane. So this is where technical advice is important. When you're going to buy an airplane and you're a business person, you don't know hardly anything about airplanes. So you're going to need somebody like myself to be your advisor here, so that you technically choose the right airplane for your mission, and then within that market you're buying it for the right price, and the airplane is kitted out, it's got engine programs and all that kind of thing. You need to look at the overall picture of the airplane. What avionics does it have? What's the status of the cabin? If there's anything broken in the cabin, can that be fixed? We looked at a G4 just recently, and there was a problem with the cabin management system, and that particular cabin management system was no longer manufactured. The manufacturer actually went out of business. So in order to repair it and get it functioning properly, the airplane needed a brand new system, which is going to be $500,000. So when we went back to speak to the owner, we wanted $250,000 discount off of the price that we'd agreed upon in the LOI, and he turned around and said, no, I've got someone who wants to lease the airplane, and they'll lease it the way it is. And so we ended up backing out the deal. So those are things that need to be looked at as well. The other thing, so of course the pre-buy inspection is important. You need to have a good engineering firm to have a look at the airplane and the records, see what has been done on the airplane and how it's been done, what different shops worked on the airplane in the past, what sort of snags have come up on that particular airplane and how they were fixed and rectified. And going over the records helps to do this. The other thing is, of course, is getting a good lawyer. So you need to have a good expert aviation lawyer that's used to doing these kind of transactions, and if they've worked internationally as well, that's important, because very often when you're buying a private jet, you're not buying it from someone down the road, you may be buying it from someone halfway across the world, and it's registered in Japan, and obviously registration in Japan is different to registration in the United States, for example. So you're going to have to export that airplane from Japan all over to the United States. How does that work? How do taxes work? How do all that? So that's another thing that needs to be looked at when you're doing the airplane deal, which is why you need a good advisor. Because a good aviation advisor, I mean, I work with a team of lawyers, a team of engineers, and I can bring everything to the table. So that's what you have to look at. And now the next thing, which is the most important, and I did say there was one element which was the most important. Now you're all focused on your airplane and what airplane you're going to buy, but the most important factor when you're buying, in particular your first jet, and you don't really know how this whole private jet thing really works, is finding good pilots. And good pilots is not a function of flight hours, okay, or function of he has 5,000 hours on this particular airplane, he must be good. There's a lot more to it. Now, the private jet needs to stay private. Sometimes things happen on the airplane, the conversations that go on the airplane, documents flying around and that. And you want to make sure that your crew, if they see anything, they don't see anything. The private jet needs to stay private. So you want to select people that are going to be private. You want to select people that are good at what they do. And one of the biggest problems in the private jet industry, and I seem to be the only one talking about this, but in my book, The Quantum Economy, I talk about this and I show you the data and show you that private aviation is 9.2 times more dangerous than flying with the airlines. What does that mean? You charter a Learjet to go from A to B. You're paying 15 times more money than first class with the airlines, and you're risking 10 times more chances of you crashing and dying on that flight. Those are the facts. A lot of these private jet operators cut corners. A lot of the pilots end up flying for an owner who's flying a King Air, and then he suddenly decides to buy a Global 6000. And this captain is now going from a small little airplane to an airplane that's going transatlantic. He has no clue what he's doing, but because he's got a relationship with the owner decides to put him on the bigger airplane. This doesn't happen in the airlines. You progress gradually. And so, you know, I advocate, you know, getting people with a certain type of background. When I consult with people and buying an aircraft, I also, part of my services is finding pilots. And I always say you need to find the right man for the job more than the right pilot for the job. You find the right man and train him on that particular aircraft, you'll get a better deal than if you do it the other way around. So this is really, really important to bear in mind, is finding good pilots. They need to be good people that are not going to mess around when they're on duty. And when I say on duty, even when they're in the hotel for 2 days while you're downtown doing your deal, they need to be professional. They need to have a good sound understanding of aviation. I like to take guys that are either ex-military or ex-airlines, because the military and the airlines are regimented, the training is done in a certain way. Or if you're coming from a company like NetJets, which run basically like an airline, the training is done to airline standards. If those are the standards, that's really what you want. I mean, if you can afford to spend $5 million on a jet, or even $20 million on a jet, what's $250,000 to $300,000 a year? You know, to hire a good pilot, pay them a good salary. The other thing is training. Often enough, if you're Part 91, the requirements are that the pilots go to simulator training once a year. Now, in the airlines, we train twice a year, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year in the simulator. I know there are a couple of families that I know that have their own fleet of private jets, and they send their pilots 3 or 4 times a year to the simulator, because their view is, my pilots only fly 200 hours a year. They're not flying 800-900 hours a year that the airline pilots do, and we go into a lot more challenging airports, so therefore they require more training. And the training needs to be specific and tailored to the destinations they're going to, and tailored to their airplane and the various incidents and accidents that may have happened on that particular airplane over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, and creating scenarios in the simulator so the pilots can fly these scenarios, make these mistakes in the simulator, learn from these mistakes, so that if something like that does happen in the aircraft, they know exactly what to do. And this is really, really important. So this is where the pilots are more important than the airplane. And the pilots need to be trained in a certain way. They have to have a certain type of background, and they need to be paid good money if you want to attract good people and keep those people. And that's really, really important. So many people, you know, they spend all the money on the airplane and they try and go cheap on the pilots, so they turn around and say, no problem, we'll just bring in some contract guys. Very bad idea. You want someone that's going to be hired by you, that's going to look after that airplane, because that captain, your lead captain, will treat that airplane like it's his own airplane. And that's what you want. You want someone that can do that for you. So let's just recap here on the whole private jet thing. We've been running here almost for 25 minutes. So the first thing is figuring out the why you're going to use a private jet, and how many other opportunities is the private jet going to open for you and your business and your family to do. So this is really, really the key number one thing. And then figuring out where you're going to go, how many people you're going to travel, and then focusing basically on the airplane type. And that's why, using an aviation advisor like myself, you can reach out to me and book a one-to-one call, and we can talk more specifics here and find the right airplane that will work for you and your business. And that's really it. And of course, It's all around, you know, the advisor. The advisor will educate you, and so that you can make an informed decision aeroplane wise. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of BizJet TV. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thumbs up. Any questions you may have, put in the comments, or just reach out to me on an email and we can schedule a call and see what we can do here to help you with your aircraft acquisition. And check out my new venture, Flight TV Network. Yes, BizJet TV is becoming part of a TV network, a bit like Netflix, but for aviation and space. So check out the trailer and go to the website flighttvnetwork.com, because we're going to be launching soon. You can subscribe, and there's some special offers will be coming for those that subscribe early. Otherwise, it's going to be about $9.99 a month to subscribe. We've got lots of content coming in from licensed content, but we're also going to be producing our own shows, about 30 different shows we've got in the making, all about aviation and space. We're going to have a news program 3 or 4 times a week, giving you the latest news that's happening in space, and with airline travel, warbirds, air shows, private jets, you name it, anything that flies, the drones, the vertical takeoff and landing, and all these lovely flying machines that we have in the world today. So we'll be covering all that on Flight TV Network. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of BizJet TV. That's all from Fabrizio here, and I'll see you on the next one.